Wyoming Territory, 1882. The prairie wind carried grit and smoke through the open gates of the Sweetwater cattle auction, and Eleanor Tilden stood on the wooden platform like a prize mule, her hands folded tight to stop them from shaking. She was not livestock, but Judge Harrow saw no difference. His gavel had struck the block an hour ago, sealing her into a marriage she had not picked, to a man who had not even looked her in the eye. And now, they waited her and that man for the transaction to finish. "Pay him and be quick," Judge Harrow grunted, squinting into the sun. Eleanor kept her eyes on the dust swirling around her boots. Her dress was too fine for this place, navy blue silk tight at the bodice, but it was all she had left from before her father's debts swallowed everything. Her fingers twitched toward the hem where she had mended it herself. The man she was meant to marry, Carlon Detcher, a cattleman with iron gray hair and a permanent curl to his lip, dropped a leather pouch into the judge's hand. He did not spare Eleanor a glance. "You will mind my rules," Carlon said low, voice like gravel. "No talking back, no visiting town, no spending coin without asking." Eleanor's jaw locked. She said nothing, and then from behind the auction pen a voice cut through the heat. "That deal's not finished yet." The crowd turned. A tall cowboy, dust on his boots, sun creased around the eyes, and a steady grip on his horse's reins, stepped out from the shade of the barn. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder and a quiet kind of authority in his stance. Carlon scowled. "What are you playing at, stranger?" "I am not playing." The cowboy's voice was calm. "You paid $500 for her. I will give you 8 to walk away." A hush dropped over the yard. Even the wind paused. Carlon barked out a laugh. "She ain't worth half that. You sweet on her or just stupid." The cowboy's eyes met Eleanor's. "I figure a woman's worth what a man is willing to risk for her." Eleanor's breath caught. No one had spoken to her like that since her mother died. Judge Harrow squinted at the cowboy. "Name?" "Jameson Orick," he said. "Of Orick Ranch, west of Medicine Bow." Eleanor blinked. Everyone knew the Orick name. Cattle, horses, water rights. But he did not look like a ranch baron. His shirt was plain, sleeves rolled to the forearms, and his hat had seen better years. Jameson tossed a canvas bag to the judge. "Count it." Judge Harrow opened the pouch, frowned at the weight, then gave one stiff nod. "By law, the contract is undone. Miss Tilden, your future is your own." Carlon spit in the dirt and stormed off, shoving past Jameson without another word. Eleanor stayed still. The sun beat down and her chest ached with a strange confusion. Free, but owned again. Was this another bargain? Jameson walked up slow, not too close. His voice softened. "That was not charity. I will not lock you down. I just could not stand to see you thrown away like that." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because I have seen too many good women bought and broken." He paused. "And because I remember you." She blinked. "You do not know me." Jameson smiled. Not wide, not showy, just a little pull at the corner of his mouth like a secret. "You bandaged my brother's knee when we were boys. He fell off a wagon outside your father's mercantile in Laramie. You were quick with a cloth and quiet with your words. I never forgot your face." Eleanor's hand lifted to her throat. That had been nearly 12 years ago. "You are welcome to ride with me if you want," Jameson said. "But only if you want something true. No bargains, no rules, just a place to breathe." She looked down at the dust again. It was all too fast. But then again, nothing had moved in her life for years. Maybe fast was what she needed. She nodded once. "I want to breathe." Jameson helped her onto his horse and swung up behind her, his hands careful and warm near her waist. They rode out of Sweetwater under the fading sun, leaving the courthouse, the judge, and the past behind. By the time they reached the Orick Ranch house near midnight, the sky was full of stars and Eleanor could feel her ribs rising freer with every mile. The house was modest, wood-planked, 2 stories, a porch with one rocking chair. But it was clean, waiting, real. In the glow of the lantern, Jameson opened the front door and gestured. "There is a room upstairs for you. You are safe here, Eleanor." She stopped on the first step and looked back. "You do not expect anything." "I expect nothing," he said, "but I hope." "For what?" He paused, then met her eyes fully. "That someday, maybe, you will want something true too." Her throat tightened. She went up the stairs with her heart pounding louder than her boots on the wood. That night, Eleanor slept with the window open, the prairie wind brushing her face. And for the first time in years, she did not dream of cages. The morning came in pale and cold, with a low haze clinging to the grasslands like breath held too long. Eleanor stood at the basin in the upstairs room, her fingers red from the pump water, the washcloth dripping at her wrist. She had not meant to rise early, but her body stirred before the rooster, as if some part of her still braced for orders she no longer had to obey. Downstairs, she heard the slow knock of boots on wood, then the scrape of the stove door. She let the cloth fall back into the basin and buttoned her sleeves with steady hands. The kitchen smelled of burnt coffee and something frying in lard. When she stepped in, Jameson was bent over the stove, a tin plate already set out with 2 biscuits and pan-fried salt pork. "You didn't have to cook," she said. "I did it for myself," he answered, not looking back. "But it's a poor thing to eat alone." She sat across from the empty chair. The table was worn, the legs uneven, but there was a small jar of wildflowers at the center, dried now but carefully arranged. She touched the glass with the tip of her finger. He slid the plate toward her. "They came from the ridge south of the creek. My sister picked them years ago. She kept things like that." Eleanor looked up. "What happened to her?" He didn't sit. Just leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Married a man who always had something to prove. She died the second winter after, starved herself near to nothing before we found her." The room held still. She wrapped her hands around the warm tin plate, the metal grounding her. "She was kind, like you," he added, quieter. "I'm not kind," she said. "You were to my brother. That was a long time ago. So's everything that ever mattered." He finally sat across from her, reaching for a mug already half filled. She watched him pour from the pot, steam curling up between them. "I can help," she offered. "With the house, the animals, whatever needs doing. You don't owe me work, I know." She met his gaze. "But I need to feel useful," he nodded once. "Then we'll start with the hen house. One of the leghorns is laying soft shells again." They ate without more words. The silence wasn't sharp, just unfinished. Later, outside, the wind had picked up, rustling through the cottonwoods behind the barn. Jameson showed her how to scatter the grit and check for mites. He moved slow, not out of weariness but with a kind of patience that made her hands steadier. She crouched near the nesting boxes, brushing straw aside. "These don't look disturbed. You sure it's not the feed?" He tilted his head. "Could be. I'll ride into town tomorrow. Get better grain." She straightened, brushing her palms on her skirt. "I'll come with you," he hesitated. "You don't need to. That's not the same as not wanting to." He gave a quiet nod. "Then we'll leave at first light." The rest of the day unfolded in small ways. A wheelbarrow mended, a fence line checked, the barn loft swept clean of mouse droppings. Eleanor moved through each task with a focus that felt more like survival than skill, but by dusk, her shoulders ached in a way that didn't come from fear. That night, they didn't speak much over supper. She read from the old almanac on the shelf while he polished his saddle gear near the fire. When she rose to head upstairs, he didn't stop her, just looked up and said, "Sleep easy." She paused at the stairs. "I haven't yet." He nodded once, not asking more. She climbed the steps slowly, one hand brushing the edge of the banister. In the room, she unpinned her hair and let it fall. The window was open again. the wind gentler now. She sat on the bed and watched the moon rise over the grazing fields. She didn't expect peace to come all at once. But in that moment, as she listened to the quiet creak of the house settling around her, she realized something had shifted. Not everything had to be taken. Some things some men could offer without demand. And maybe, just maybe, she'd learn how to offer back. They rode into Medicine Bow under a sky the color of tin, the morning wind sharp enough to sting. Jameson kept the pace steady, not rushed, his hat low against the cold. Eleanor rode beside him, not behind, wrapped in a wool coat too large for her shoulders, its sleeves folded back at the cuffs. The quiet was companionable, broken only by hooves striking frozen earth. The town came into view slow, like it always did, low buildings huddled together, smoke curling up from chimneys, a dog barking somewhere near the livery. Jameson dismounted first and tied the reins to the hitch. Eleanor followed suit, her boots hitting the ground hard enough to jolt her knees. "You want to come in for the grain or wait out here?" he asked, adjusting his collar. "I'll come." Inside the mercantile, the warmth hit sharp. Shelves were lined with dry goods, bolts of fabric, and everything from horseshoe nails to canning jars. A bell over the door jingled behind them. "Morning, Orick," called the shopkeeper, a man with thinning hair and a red kerchief cinched tight at the throat. "Didn't expect you in this early. Need better layer mash. Something with grit mixed in. You got mites?" "No, just poor eggs." The shopkeeper looked past Jameson to Eleanor. "Don't believe I've seen you in town before." She met the man's eyes. "I've been out of sight. That's all." He nodded, polite but cautious. The territory could be hard on women without names. Jameson paid in coin and lifted the sack without effort. Outside, he set it in the wagon bed and brushed his gloves clean. "We could head back," he said, "but there's a blacksmith 2 doors down. I've been meaning to get my stirrup latch fixed." "I'd like to walk a little," she said. "If that's all right." He studied her face a moment, then tipped his head toward the boardwalk. "I'll find you when I'm done." She wandered slow past the milliner's, where 2 bonnets hung behind fogged glass, then paused outside the bookshop. The door was open, the bell inside faint. A girl no older than 12 sat behind the counter, reading aloud from a worn volume. And he rode for 3 days without a fire, just the stars to guide him. Eleanor leaned against the doorframe, listening. The girl looked up. "You can come in." "I don't have funds for books," Eleanor said. The girl shrugged. "Reading don't cost nothing, not if you stay quiet and put things back." Eleanor's hand drifted along the shelf, touching the spines. She hadn't held a book since her father's store closed. Her fingers stopped on one, The Prairie Traveler, worn and softened at the corners. She opened it, eyes falling on a map of the Platte River Trail. "You like maps?" the girl asked. "I used to trace the rivers with my thumb, pretend I'd follow them someday." The girl grinned. "I like the pages that tell you what to pack. I pick what I'd take if I had to leave fast." Eleanor closed the book gently. "That's a good thing to know." Jameson stepped into the doorway then, the light behind him. "I see you found the shelves." She turned, then held the book out to the girl. "Thank you. Come back if you want," the girl said. "There's more maps." As they walked back toward the wagon, Jameson glanced at her hands. "Find something worth carrying," she looked ahead. "Maybe not yet." "But I remembered what it feels like." They rode home with the grain tied down and the wind calmer. As the house came into view, the sky had shifted to a softer gray, the kind that held snow but didn't threaten it yet. That evening, Eleanor stood at the hearth while the kettle warmed. Jameson leaned on the edge of the table, a small leather pouch in his palm. "I've got something," he said. "Was my mother's." She turned. "What is it?" He opened the pouch and tipped it forward. A silver thimble rolled into his hand. It was simple, worn smooth at the top. She died young, he said. Didn't leave much, but she used to mend everything with this, even barbed wire gloves. Eleanor stepped closer. Why give it to me? Because I figure you'll make use of it. And because I'd rather it be in hands that still know how to keep things whole. She took it gently, the metal still warm from his skin. She didn't speak for a moment, just turned the thimble in her fingers. I'll keep it, she said. Not for sewing, for remembering. He nodded once. Then softer. I thought you might. Later, when the fire had burned down and the shutters were drawn tight, Jameson passed her a folded blanket for the stairs. She took it, then hesitated. Do you ever miss having someone sit across from you at night, not for talking, just to be there? He met her eyes. I miss it every day. She didn't move right away. Then she stepped to the rocker near the hearth and sat. He didn't speak, just poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one, and sat across from her on the floor, back to the wall. The fire cracked low, and the silence between them was no longer empty. The first snow came in the night, soft and soundless. By dawn, the ground was white as linen, the sky still low and heavy. Eleanor stood at the window of the upstairs room, watching flakes drift against the barn's slanted roof. Jameson's horse stood motionless near the fence, steam curling from its nostrils. She dressed in layers, pulling the wool coat tight as she stepped outside. Her breath plumed in the cold. Jameson was already by the woodpile, splitting logs with practiced rhythm. The crack of the axe echoed between the trees. He didn't look up as she crossed the yard, but his next swing slowed. Frost came early, she said, tucking her hands beneath her arms. There's still time to bank the windows, he answered, setting a fresh log in place. I'll show you how. He handed her a hammer and a strip of canvas. They worked side by side, nailing down the coverings over the glass. She watched how his fingers moved, deliberate, unhurried, the same way he rode, the same way he listened. By midday, a wind had picked up, pushing the snow into drifts along the fence line. They returned inside with boots heavy and cheeks raw. She peeled off her gloves near the stove, letting the heat bite back into her skin. Jameson poured water into the kettle and set it on the iron plate. You ever wintered this far west? Once, when I was small. My father moved us through Rawlins trying to reach Oregon. We turned back before spring. My mother said the wind sounded like it was mourning. He glanced at the window where the snow pressed against the sill. It does that. Some nights worse than others. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. How long do you think it'll last? Too early to say, but we'll stay fed. I've laid up enough stores. Barring misfortune, we'll keep warm too. She stepped away from the wall and knelt by the fire, adding a split log to the flame. You always plan for misfortune. Only a fool doesn't. She turned to look at him. What did you think would come of buying me out of that deal? He wiped his hands on a cloth and leaned his hip against the table, watching her without pressing. I didn't think past getting you free. That was enough to start, but not enough to finish. No, he said carefully. Not if you wanted more than that. She rose slowly, brushing soot from her skirt. What if I did? He straightened but didn't move. Then I'd ask what you needed first, before anything else. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted to the shelf above the hearth. A tin box sat there, dented at one corner. I need to stop fearing quiet, she said. The kind that comes after shouting. I'm not used to silence meaning safety. Jameson's voice was low. Then stay long enough to learn different. That evening they ate in the kitchen, the windows fogged over and the air thick with the scent of boiled beans and onion. Eleanor stirred her spoon slow, listening to the wind curl around the walls. Jameson finished his plate and leaned back in his chair. You ever work a letterpress? She looked up. No, why? There's one in town. The man who runs it's going blind. I help him some afternoons setting type. He needs a steady hand. She tilted her head. You think I've got one? I know you do. Eleanor set her spoon down. I'd like to learn something new, he nodded once. I'll take you next week if the roads hold. She smiled, small but real. I'd like that. Later, she stood in the doorway of the upstairs room, holding the silver thimble in her palm. Jameson stood at the bottom of the steps, one hand on the rail. I used to think love was something loud, she said, like the stories said it should be. But I think I was wrong. Jameson's eyes didn't leave hers. What do you think it is now? She came down the first step, then another. I think it's what remains, after the noise is gone. He reached for her hand, not pulling, just holding it steady. Then let it remain. And in the hush between their breaths, with snow pressing soft against the windows, something true settled between them, quiet, warm, and sure as fire. The snow held for 5 days. By the 6th, the wind had quieted and the white crust across the prairie had started to soften beneath the sun. Eleanor sat on the porch rail with her coat buttoned to the chin, watching Jameson fit new shoes to a gelding beside the paddock. His sleeves were rolled again, forearms steady as he worked the rasp down the edge of the hoof. She hadn't said anything aloud, but she'd started to memorize the sound of the rasp, the way it slowed when he was thinking. You've got a rhythm, she said. Like you're listening for something. He looked up from the hoof, brushing a curl of hair from his brow with the back of his wrist. I listen for balance. You can feel it, once you've held enough hooves in your hand. Some horses carry weight uneven and never show it until it's too late. You think people do the same, more often than not. She tucked one gloved hand beneath the other. I never noticed it in myself, but I think I've been leaning wrong for years. He set the rasp aside and stood, letting the gelding nuzzle his shoulder. You held yourself upright longer than most would have managed. That's not the same as leaning wrong. She looked out toward the tree line. I used to think if I just stayed quiet, I'd be spared the worst of it. But quiet's not a shield. No, he said, but it's the start of listening. And that's more than most ever learn. That afternoon, she went to the storage room near the back of the house, where the old trunks were stacked and forgotten. She found one with brass corners and a cracked leather handle, the initials CT carved faint into the lid. Her father's. She'd thought it long gone. She opened it slowly, the hinges stiff with disuse. Inside lay a stack of cloth-bound ledgers and a ledger pencil worn to a nub. Beneath those, a folded map. She spread it across the table in the front room, tracing the faded lines with her fingertip. Jameson came in with his coat still dusted in snow and paused. That yours, my father's. He mapped every route he meant to take but never followed any of them. Always said he was waiting for the right time. Seems like time never waits back, she nodded. No. It doesn't. Jameson stepped closer, studying the map. That trail there, he pointed to a faint dotted line near the Wind River Range. That's Old Crow country. My uncle ran mail through there once. Said the land was so quiet it made your heartbeat feel loud. She smiled, eyes still on the parchment. You ever think about leaving this place? Used to. Before my brother died, I thought I might head south. But then the land needed keeping, and the cattle took root. And now, he looked at her, not the map. Now I think about what it'd mean to stay with someone, more than where I'd go. That night, she brought down the quilt from the cedar chest upstairs and spread it over the sofa where he often read in the evenings. He glanced up from the county paper, brows raised. It's stitched with names, she said, smoothing the corner. My mother and her sisters made it before I was born. Each square's a piece of someone's dress or apron. He set the paper aside. You want it here. I want something of mine to live in this room. Something that doesn't leave. He stood and crossed to her, his hand brushing her sleeve. You planning on staying then? She looked up. If you'll have me. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he took her hand and brought it to his chest, over the spot where his heartbeat was steady beneath the fabric. "I've been hoping for that since the moment you stepped onto this porch." She leaned into him, and he wrapped both arms around her with a gentleness that felt earned. By spring, the thaw had greened the ridge and loosened the creek's edges. The hens laid strong shelled eggs, and the cattle grazed deeper into the pasture. Jameson built her a writing desk from pine he cut himself, fitting it beneath the front window where the light came in clean. She used it to copy out new maps from her father's trunk, correcting the lines with fresh ink, adding notes where the rivers had shifted or dried. She started helping at the letterpress twice a month, her hands now sure with the type. The man who ran it gave her a key, saying he trusted her eyes more than his own. They married in June, beneath the cottonwood that stood alone behind the barn. It was a small gathering, just 3 neighbors, the pressman, and the girl from the bookshop who brought wild iris in a jar. Jameson wore his best shirt, and Eleanor wore a dress she'd sewn herself with blue thread. There were no vows beyond what they already knew. He took her hands and said, "You're the first home I've ever chosen," she said, "and you're the first place I've ever wanted to stay." They built a life slow and rooted. Mornings with coffee and quiet, days filled with work that used both hands and heart, and nights where the wind outside was only wind, not warning. Years passed. The map on the wall above her desk grew fuller with notations, though they never left. They didn't need to. The world had come to meet them where they stood, and in that house where silence once meant fear, it came to mean peace. Where stillness had once been a cage, it became comfort. The fire never went out. The windows stayed warm. And the love between them was not loud, but lasting, spoken in the language of shared weight, quiet care, and every small thing done without asking.